Good day to you my friends, I'm Kenetor and today I'll be reviewing the new sci-fi survival factory game StarRupture from Creepy Jar. I've put in a good 35 plus hours so it will not just be a first impression. So stick around and let's run through how well it played, and I'll be keeping spoilers to an absolute minimum. Shout out to Creepy Jar for supplying this early review copy. One of the biggest requests I constantly saw during the early access of the factory game was to add combat mechanics, and StarRupture has certainly been showing off its almost tower defense levels of combat to go along with its unique factory setup. The old and now often overused trope of being a prisoner is put into play here, with a selection of 4 convicts to choose from. There's no stat difference here, it's just different voiceover flavour throughout your play. And you can switch characters during play with the respawn chamber, should your chosen character's voice start to sound a little too familiar. Like it or not, it does help you waste no time and jump into the game. The onboarding is very streamlined and gets you to grips with the mining and building quite nicely, but it does miss details not explained elsewhere. For example, the mining tools overheating or mining speed mechanics, or the optional size variations for buildings. And as a stickler for really neat layouts in factories, I have nothing but kudos to the devs for adding these. It's a small thing, just a slight difference in footprint with the building recentered, but it certainly lights up the right parts in my spicy brain, having the rail inputs and outputs align nicely. And speaking of rails, that's right, no belts in this factory game, it's all overhead rails. Not only that, you will find it's a demand-based system, not a supply system. Items will not leave their storage or manufacturing machine until something on its connected network requests the item, and then only the amounts requested are sent on the rails. That doesn't mean you could ignore rail limits, mind you, but it does mean you can safely mix items on the belt, and the system can just sort itself out up to its max throughput. This should make it a bit easier on newcomers to factory games lured in by the need to make every bug a dead bug. It also helps offset the somewhat awful throughput UI. Most buildings will show parts and time per cycle, not parts per second or parts per minute, so this will frustrate veteran factory players. Why this was fumbled when clearly other parts of the game have been so well thought out, we'll probably never know. Thankfully, it's an easy fix if they want to. Building itself is massively simplified versus other factory games by having a dedicated building resource, so you don't need to lug around so much to build the factory itself, but unlocking new things can be just as tricky as the other games. This has the added benefit of making new satellite bases all over the map to take advantage of all the resources very easy to do, but it's still time consuming in an enjoyable way. Finding the right spots and layout for the right amount of factory in the very variable terrain made for a fun challenge in certain spots. Progression comes in 2 main forms. First is delivering requested resources by 5 different companies by shooting the resources into space. In turn, each level of requests that you fulfill will grant you something from that company's specialization. So this could be a new factory machine from Selenium Corp, or weapons tech from Griffiths Blue, for example. The other form is from the recipe station. Only machines unlocked from the companies will show here, and this requires manually submitted resources, research points, and in some cases, a blueprint. Now, blueprint hunting along with resource finding will be your primary drivers for exploration. While resource fields are easily seen from a distance, blueprints will prove trickier to locate, as they will be in very specific places. When it comes to exploring throughout the game's huge map, the scenery is quite varied, with different flora appearing in different terrain types. I often found the grassy, green or mossy areas are stunning to see when you get a good higher up view from a mountaintop, or once unlocked with the construction drone. The views can just be straight up gorgeous. That is until the game's namesake happens, and the star lets out a burst of energy, which sets the entire world aflame, incinerating everything. This transformation, when you first see it, is quite jaw-dropping. The huge blast wave blasting up to your base, the fire torrent, the ash and smog that follows. The visual identity of the planet completely changes, but along with that, so does a little bit of the gameplay. Each fire wave will bring new asteroids to mind for their cores, a key resource for expanding your bases. All plant life is burnt to a cinder, and sulfur fields are ignited, and these hazard areas, well, they're suddenly just not so hazardous anymore. at least for a while. You see, this planet, Arcadia 7, has an uncanny habit of regenerating itself at such a tremendous rate. Surface water returns, plants regrow, and those damn bugs, well, they just hid underground till the grass comes back, and they pop back up, all ready to take you on all over again. But plan your trip with the right timing and you can travel a good portion of the map or explore points of interest completely hassle-free thanks to the fire. StarRupture really makes for a good exploration and factory game with a tiny side of tower defense and survival. But it did have me wondering where all the enemies promised in the trailers were at. Where were the base raids that I would have to fight off? Not once did I get attacked by more than a dozen at most. Thankfully, the game's Discord had an answer for me. It turns out I had not once upgraded any of my base cores that helps cool the bases down after the fire wave. In my own efficiency, I had expanded and outsourced so much to other smaller factories to stay within the original build limits that I hadn't even needed to. And this kind of left a sad taste in my mouth, as it's one of the features I was really looking forward to the most, and it turned out to be quite lackluster. There are only 2 turrets, one is a manual feed ammo and the other is fully automated. There's no variation in turret types, no trade-offs to manage, no weaknesses to exploit. Just a gun that needs power and ammo. And this is where its unfinished nature rears its head. Yes, it's early access, but the rest of the factory parts gave us so much already, it just felt like the guns were a bit of an afterthought. As for not needing to upgrade, well, that's also a balance problem, and they were definitely far too generous with the building limits of the base core. So this could be easily fixed, or even better yet, let it be user adjusted via a slider for difficulty, and then we could see some really challenging gameplay from the get-go. I will touch on the story a little, but without spoilers of course. There is one, although it's not very deep, at least not yet. Most of it is lore sprinkled very lightly around the POIs in the forms of voice logs, message terminals, and PDA logs. Honestly though, with enemies closing in nearly constantly around the POIs, it should really all be voice logs, as you don't have time to sit and read unless it's just after a fire wave. The rest of the story is a little rear loaded in what this early access version has to offer, and when you finally do get to it, you really get a nice change of pace and gameplay style to go with it. At least for a little bit. Depending on how well you played up to this point though, you may or may not be prepared for what you find. And that's all I'll say on that one. Overall, StarRupture definitely over-delivers when it comes to value for money, especially with the launch discount. It has great visuals, solid factory building. For an early access title, it also delivers a little bit more than most in my opinion, and it's a solid foundation for future expansion and development. Just don't come into it expecting all the bells and whistles and massive quality of life features that other factory games have spent years putting into them. Yes, it could definitely use a few quick quality of life fixes, but what game doesn't at launch? And a lot of what I want to see in the future looks like it's already set to be included via the roadmap that they have shared. And much more. In terms of bugs, I only encountered a few minor ones like getting stuck on terrain once, and a placement issue with rails that has sadly persisted from the early playtests, which is a bad start to their bug squashing reputation. The game, however, never crashed for me once. So there you have it. Let me know if you're going to pick it up. I absolutely think you should. I would even go as far to say I think they've maybe underpriced this one a little bit. I've had an absolute blast playing so far, and I can't wait to build and expand my base further to maximise everything, since the factory must grow. Now do leave me a like and subscribe for more sci-fi and space gaming content, as it helps me out a ton. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Kenetor, out.